this flows the same as this. Either I'm lying or they are. I'm Gale Banks, and it's time to give S&B a fact check.
What? Bro, what are you talking about?
That's not true!
Try again.
We're about to launch a new video series, and I might just blow up a new Cummins. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Okay, let's talk Cummins intakes. There's something going on in the cold air intake business that has separated the men from the boys. Air intake sensors such as mass airflow and pressure have become more sensitive. Let me explain what happens if you design an intake that outflows stock. It will set trouble codes and cause poor performance on 19 through 24 Cummins 6.7s. We immediately realized it was time to turn on the Banks invention machine. What we came up with was an air mass control strategy which allows huge airflow gains without setting codes. Meanwhile, competitors' products must flow basically stock or worse to avoid setting codes, making their products nothing more than cosmetic. Here are two intakes for the 19 through 24 RAM Cummins. This is the Banks RAM Air Intake system, and this one is the S&B. Neither set codes, but they go about it in completely different ways. To understand the difference, let's follow the airflow. We'll start with the air inlet area. This is where air enters the filter housing. You want this flow area to be as large as possible. This is not a place where you want a choke point. S&B's flow area is 33.4 square inches. Banks is 38.4 square inches, or 15% larger. So going in, S&B chokes compared to Banks by 15%. Now let's have a look at the filter outlet area. This one is S&B, this one is Banks. This is where the filter mates to the intake tube. You don't want a choke point at the outlet of the filter. The Banks filter outlet is 24.7 square inches compared to S&B at 17.6 square inches. As a result, we have a 41% outlet area advantage over S&B. There's no sense in having a large filter only to immediately restrict the airflow out of it. And what's with this tube? While we're using fluid dynamics pioneered by NASA, resulting in minimal pressure loss, it looks like S&B is using 90-degree elbows from the plumbing aisle. Air does not like 90-degree constant cross-section bends, and they've got two of them. It's like they wanted to maximize their pressure loss. As if this isn't bad enough, let's compare the filter design. We'll start with the filter envelope. If you pull the membrane over the filter, this envelope is the surface area that you would measure. S&B has a total envelope area of 171.5 square inches, as compared to the Banks Big Ass filter at 227 square inches. That's a 32% dimensional advantage for Banks. What matters more than envelope area is effective filter area. Effective filter area is the area of the filter media that air and debris actually have access to. Because S&B's pleats are so close together, their effective filter area isn't much greater than their envelope area. Air and debris can't get down between the pleats, so they're basically useless. In my opinion, it's filter area you paid for but can't use. How do I know that? This feeler gauge is 20 thousandths thick. It's thinner than a credit card. If the pleats are able to grip a 20 thousandths feeler gauge, it means nothing's flowing down there. I'm jonesing to show you this thing on the flow bench, but we'll get to that. So how big is S&B's effective filter area? I calculate their effective area to be about 20% more than their envelope area, or around 206 square inches, which is just a little more than their 171.5 square inch envelope area. So now let's compare it to the Banks filter. We've designed our filter to allow air and debris all the way to the bottom of the pleats, just like God intended. This means our effective filter area is the entire surface, all 1,036 square inches. This thing has 5 times or 403% more effective filter area than S&B. In other words, you're using every square inch of our filter, while most of the S&B filter will remain virgin for its entire life. Now we're talking about dirt and debris and this thing called caking. Dirt and debris lay on top rather than getting all the way down in the valleys. It's going to cake up on the available surface, so you'll be cleaning the filter a lot more often. And because it gets dirty sooner, I believe you'll spend more time driving with restricted airflow. Envelope area, effective area, dirt caking, pleat count, pleat depth, it all speaks to restricting mass airflow, commonly known as MAF. So how do Banks and S&B compare against each other? I've enlisted Quinn to test them on the flow bench. Okay, now let's have a look at the data. Along the y-axis, we have mass airflow measured in pounds per minute. This is your MAF. Along the x-axis is your intake air system pressure loss in inches of water as measured at the turbo compressor inlet. You want this number to be as low as possible. As you move to the right, you lose more pressure. Our stock 2020 RAM 6.7 high output flows 56.5 pounds per minute at the horsepower peak. So we'll draw a line here. I generally shoot for 10 inches of water maximum pressure loss at the horsepower peak. That's why Quinn tested them all at 10 inches of water. Let's look at stock first. At 10 inches of water, the stock intake flows 42.21 pounds per minute. By comparison, the Banks RAM air flowed 55.85 pounds per minute at 10 inches of water, which to my delight is within 1% of the MAF at peak horsepower, which was my design goal. As for S&B, we tested it with their box plug in and with a box plug out. Here's a curiosity. For some reason, they give you an optional plug, but the instructions leave it up to you as to whether or not you use it. Here's our results. S&B flowed 39.73 pounds per minute without the plug, and installing the plug cut the flow to 38.27 pounds per minute. So what does that look like on a bar graph? Banks flows 32% better than stock. S&B flows 6% less than stock with a box plug out and 9% less than stock with a box plug in. Did you hear what I just said? S&B flows worse than the stock. If you bought this intake, I think you paid to lose power, and it's not even dirty yet. It's pretty apparent that we've whipped S&B. But let's look at our mass airflow advantage directly compared to S&B. We're 40.57% better than their best configuration. So you take the S&B out of the box with a clean filter and you get the performance equivalent of running a stock dirty filter. How do I know that? Because we measured the pressure loss. Let's compare pressure loss at the peak mass airflow of 56.5 pounds per minute. Banks hit the number at 10.27 inches of water. Stock hit the number at 18.72 inches of water. S&B with a box plug out hit the number at 20.69 inches of water. And S&B with a box plug in was the worst of all at 22.08 inches of water. So I said to myself, I wonder what Banks' turbo compressor inlet pressure advantage is over S&B. I'm using S&B with a plug out as the baseline, where normally I'd use stock as the baseline, because normally stock would have been the worst performer. So how badly did stock beat S&B? It turns out that stock has a 9.6% pressure advantage over S&B. And the Banks RAM air has a 50.4% pressure advantage over S&B. This got me to asking, how much do we have to restrict airflow through the Banks setup to make it flow as bad as S&B? This ought to be good. Let's watch Quinn test it.
All right, welcome to the Banks Flow Bench. Today, we're gonna be running a test together that's gonna be very illustrative of the difference between the restriction of the S&B air intake system and the Banks RAM air intake system. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna flow this at 56.5 pounds per minute, which matches the peak MAF reading on your truck. While we do that, we're gonna be looking at this pressure right here. This is your compressor inlet pressure, or the pressure of the air entering the mouth of your turbocharger. So that's gonna tell us the difference or the restriction between the ambient air and the air once it's gotten down into your turbo. That's gonna show on this Banks iDash Data Pro right here. And you need to remember, this is restriction. This is like your golf score. Higher is worse, lower is better. So we're gonna start by baselining the S&B. I'm gonna get that pressure for us. And then we're gonna start choking off the Banks big ass filter, adding restriction until we match the restriction of the S&B. So let's get started. 20.5 inches of water. So I'm gonna note that down. Now, I'm gonna get this guy off. I'm gonna get the Banks RAM air intake system installed, and we're gonna see what that flows. That's the Banks RAM air intake system installed. This is exactly as it comes out of the box, unaltered. We're gonna see how this flows completely unchanged stock, and then we're gonna start adding restriction. Okay, 10.2 inches of water. We got some work to do. We need to start choking this thing down significantly. This guy off of here. And now I'm gonna start applying our high-tech restriction enhancer. Let's get started. Looks like we got about a third of it covered. Is that enough? Not even close. I'm gonna call that about half. We're gonna start there, see how much more we have to add. Yes, I said more. It's going to be more, I promise you. Half of the filter taped up. Let's see how much restriction we added. Looked like 11.3 inches of water to me. Remember, we're going for 20.5, so we're not even close yet. More. That is a lot of duct tape. We're down to just over an inch, about an inch and a quarter of filter media remaining exposed. Massive restriction that we've done to this filter. Let's get this back on here and see if we are matching the pressure loss of the S&B yet. Filter housing on. All right, looking for 20.5 inches of water. See how we did. Wow, we got it. That's as good as that's getting. So we just saw that together. This is how much tape we had to apply to the Banks big ass filter to choke it down enough to match the flow of the S&B. Let me restate that. This flows the same as this.
If S&B set out to design the world's best airflow restrictor posing as a cold air intake, I think I'm giving them an A+. Now that we know how bad this thing is, let's go on their website to see how they're actually selling it. Wait a minute, look at this. S&B claims a 40.63% airflow improvement. How could this be after what we just saw? Let's open their test results PDF. Well, here's the 40.63% gain, but what's with the date? September of 2021. I wonder if the tests were performed with an earlier filter design. Let's go back to the main page. Okay, the first photo in the carousel looks like the current filter sitting here on our bench. But if we flip through the photos, we find a white filter, presumably their dry element. But wait a minute, here's another white filter. Look at the difference between the pleats. These are two completely different filters. I'm willing to bet that one of them is their original filter that may have flowed 40.63% better than stock. But we know this new one with tighter pleats flows worse than stock. Well, the only way this works is if they're selling the original open pleat filter, which they're not. That's dirty. So let's talk about what you'll get from a Banks RAM Air Intake on your 19 to 24 RAM. Increased air pressure to the compressor means your turbo will spool up quicker. It'll reach the ECM's target boost at a lower shaft speed. You'll feel less turbo lag. Hitting the ECM's target mass airflow with less boost liberates horsepower. You can keep your foot in the same pedal position and make more power than stock. Or you can back out of the throttle and make the same power, which is fuel economy. And you'll have more turbo overhead on hot days and at high altitudes. And that turbo music is so sweet. I think I'm going to send S&B the bill for that roll of duct tape.